Hey guys, welcome back to Intellipaat's Python Week. So, in this particular session, we're going to look into Python modules. And in the previous module, we looked into Python threads and various concepts around Python threads, and also we looked into multiple hands-ons. Now, let's take a quick glance at the agenda. First, we'll start off with what are modules, and then understand why should we use modules. And after we know that, we'll start off with how can we use these modules, and once we know how to use them, we'll be looking into a hands-on where we'll be creating and importing from modules. Once that is done, we'll be executing modules as scripts, and again, once we know how to do that, we'll be actually doing a hands-on on that particular topic.
So before moving on with the session, please subscribe to our channel.
And also hit the bell icon for the upcoming updates from our channel. And also, if you enjoy our content, you can leave a like.
What are modules? Modules are at the base of what we're trying to understand in this entire presentation. So let's get through it and try and understand what exactly are modules and how we can use them. So whenever we execute some Python code in an interpreter and then quit the Python interpreter, the definitions made in that interpreter session are lost later on. So to give you a quick example, let's say that you open up your terminal and you type in the Python shell and you enter the Python shell or the Python interpreter, as many people would call it. There are other ways of launching it as well. Now you declare a few variables, you create a few classes, you create a few functions, you use them in the code that you just wrote, and then you close it off. As soon as you close the entire interpreter off, everything that was declared, every bit of code that you had written just now has now been lost. That's mainly because all the code that you write in the interpreter is only bound to that interpreter session. It's not saved anywhere, it's just put in memory. And when you use it, you use it. And when you don't use it, it is freed from the memory. And it's essentially the memory is wiped clear, and then there's no way for you to access that. So that happens. Now, the problem with that is that majority of the code that we write isn't just some one-off thing that you write and then you forget about it. Majority of the code that we write is code that needs iterative refinement. We need to continuously write more code, refine the previous code, make sure that everything is managed correctly, and so on and so forth. In cases like this kind of model is not going to be something that works. However, if you wish to save these definitions for later use, we can save it inside a file with a .py extension. This is what we've been doing so far. What we can do is we can just create a file with the .py extension and then run it through the Python interpreter. The interpreter will understand that it's trying to get through the code written in the syntax of Python, and it's a Python file. So all the code that you have written thus far in your interpreter, if you can just copy it and paste it inside a file with a .py extension, then you can just rerun it whenever you wish to. You don't have to type in the entire code again into an interpreter session and then use it again and again. It is persisted into some storage that doesn't get cleared off until you decide to clear it off. Now, if this file gets really long, and that would be the case if you're trying to build anything substantial, then you can split this file into smaller files so they can be managed easily. Any program that you write has multiple aspects to it. There can be aspects related to data storage. There can be aspects related to in networking, internet protocols. There can be aspects related to caching, aspects related to conversion, so on and so forth. So any program is going to be a collection of these small files. Otherwise, a really long file is going to be there and it's going to be really difficult to manage. Suppose you're trying to create a program that takes in the user's current to-do list, and when the user logs in again, it will show them the to-do list that appears thus far, and that they can use that one as well. The thing here is that you would have to firstly create the user interface for that. If it's just a command line application, then also you would have to write something so that the user can understand what are the keys to type and how to navigate through the entire application. The other thing would be the persistence aspect of it. So whenever the user creates a new to-do list, adds new item to that to-do list, and updates that to-do list, all of that needs to be saved somewhere. So there's going to be a lot of code related to that as well. Now you can store it inside memory, but you can also store it inside a file, inside a database, and many other options are available for you as well. So with that, you also have networking related issues. So maybe this is a web application. in which you want the user to be able to essentially send over some HTTP request with the authorization credentials, as well as the information about the data that they want and the information about the process they want the data to go through. So for instance, they've sent some to-do list and they want to store it, they want to update it, or maybe they send the ID of the to-do list that they want to retrieve and take a look at it. So you can take a look at any one of these scenarios and all of them work correctly. However, the thing to notice here is that there's just a lot of things to do, and putting all of this in a single file is going to be really, really difficult. So in many cases like this, we want to split them up into smaller chunks. These chunks are called files. All of these files have the .py extension and they contain code related to one thing and one thing only. You might also want to group a few of these things together. For instance, a few functions in a file which you can be using for several other projects as well. So to give you an example, let's say that you write code that can interact with the database that you want to persist that data into. Now you think the code is more reusable than just for the current project, so you can copy and paste the entire file into your new project and just start using it from there instead of having to take the entire file, then copy it, then paste it, then make changes, and then integrate it with the existing project. This is a very common practice. When you're building a project, you end up writing code that turns out to be very reusable, and that reusable code is then given to other files, other projects. Many other people in your own team might end up using it in their own personal projects, so on and so forth. So this is a great part of code reuse. And for that, you need to firstly be able to separate the code that you have into fewer smaller chunks or fewer smaller files that contain the interrelated pieces. So for instance, everything related to attaching itself to database, adding things to database, removing things from database, all of that. If all of that is in one file, then it's very easy for the user to be able to manage it and use it. If all of the database related stuff is scattered through different files, let's say file A contains stuff to connect to database and add things to database, file B contains things that can only remove things from the database, and so on and so forth. That is going to be really fragmented and really difficult for you to manage and understand how to use. So in Python, we can do these things by saving it all together in a file and then using it in other files or maybe inside an interpreter session. To give you an example, maybe I just saved everything that I need to save in order to print something in a particular format, and now all I want to do is use it in any of the projects or any of the interpreter session that I want. I can simply use the file that I have just saved everything in inside these projects or the interpreter session, and I can simply call the functions or methods or whatever I've created so that they all work correctly the way they are supposed to. So in any case, things like these are really, really important and are easy for us to understand as well. And they make the code really easy to understand, really easy to think about logically, and it makes it really easy for us to interpret the code as well. Makes code reuse really importantly a very easy thing to do as well. So these are the kinds of files in Python that are called modules. To put it simply, a module is a file or a Python module is a file that contains Python code related to solving a particular problem, which can be imported by other modules or files or interpreters so that they can solve the problem. So here's the basic definition. To put it simply, a Python module is a Python file that contains code which can be imported and used by other Python script files. So if you have a Python file that contains some code that needs to be used by other Python files, then that file is going to be called a module, or is technically it is a module. So you can use it as such. You can share it among different people, different groups, different projects. You can share it among different teams as well, as long as they are using Python to do what they want to do. Now, this module can contain several things that we can import. It can contain variables, it can contain functions, it can contain class, so on and so forth. All of these things are available in Python, and we can use them to basically wrap around some logic that we can use. So take a look at that, understand how to use it, and now let's take a look at why are modules so useful, and then we'll take a look at other things such as how to use modules and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at that.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides online Python certification training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
why would you want to use modules? So as you can see, modules provide several benefits, such as they are simple, reusable, and they are scoped. Let's try and understand all of these topics in a bit more detail. So the first thing is that modules are simple. So modules allow us to simplify our code to a great extent. One of the fundamental concepts that lead us to modules is, as we have seen before, is the need to break up a file into different files that are more focused on solving one single problem. So that's how you simplify the code. Each module can focus on a small portion of a problem. So as we have discussed in the previous example, if I have a to-do list that has several aspects to it, such as caching, database storage, networking, so on and so forth, all of these things can be separated into smaller components and single files. These files are then used by the main file or the Python scripts to execute or orchestrate how the actions should be performed. When the user sends in some input, our job is to firstly validate the input, which can be one module, then save it in if the validation is successful, save it inside the database, save it inside the cache as well, and then send it over the network to our database server as well. So local database has it, local cache has it, and our external databases have it as well. So in cases like this, however, this is a very contrived example, we have greatly simplified our code by simply breaking it up into smaller and smaller portions. Now that may be a really simplified example, but you can take this process on recursively. So you have a really huge project in which you have separated these things out into smaller problems. So these problems may be so big that you may have to break them up into smaller and smaller problems as you go along. So for instance, the display aspect of it, maybe you want to abstract it out so you can create smaller files out of it. So each of these files correspond to different kinds of displays, such as the print display, the terminal display, the graphical user interface display, so on and so forth. And all of this can be done using modules. All we have to do is understand how to break things up into smaller and smaller chunks. From there on, it makes our code easier to understand and write as well. Now we have a clear understanding of how focused a particular file should be. That makes it really easy for us to essentially add and remove features. Adding and removing features is mainly going to be a task of adding a new file, adding new code into it, or altering the existing code based on the file and the feature that we're tackling. So it's going to be really easy and really simple for us to use. Now, this may not be the only way to do it. There are many ways you can decide to split a module into separate submodules, but this is a really proven and effective way. So we recommend that you take a look at that as well. Then comes reusability, and a module can contain code which can later be used in other files. To give you an example, let's say that you have a module inside which there are several files that are useful. So for instance, I have a project that has several modules. All of these modules do different things, and some of these things are reusable. So for instance, data validation is something that is used in almost all the projects. Now, each one of these projects may implement it differently, but they all use it one way or the other. So for instance, if you take in a user's email, the first point of business is to take the input from the user and then validate if it is an email, because many a times we get malformed emails, malformed URLs, malformed usernames, malformed passwords, so on and so forth. Maybe you want the user to be able to register to use your application, and in the registration process there are several issues. Number one is you have a specific set of rules for the password that the user can set. So for instance, there should be two @ symbols but no more. There should not be any other thing other than alphanumeric characters and few special characters such as the $symbol, the @ symbol, and the underscore symbol. Also, you want it to be a mix of the uppercase and lowercase characters. All of these are specific validation rules which you can implement in your application inside a module. Call it the validation module. Now, depending on how this is implemented, you can then extract this module and use it into different projects as well that have similar requirements. So for instance, you have another project in which you want the same set of rules to be applied to the password field, validation of the password field. Now to do that, you can simply just copy and paste the code, or maybe the better way of doing it is to copy and paste the entire module that contains all the code related to validating the module or validating the password, and it will work exactly the same way as it did in the previous project. So one module can be imported and used by multiple files, and all these files will be using the same code. So if you have the same module that is being used by multiple files, if you make the changes to the same code, then the same module will have the same changes being reflected to all the other files. This is different from, let's say, for example, if you have copied the code from one module, pasted it in another module, and then you're using it there. In that case, you may or may not be, you have different places where you need to update the same code, and you may or may not be able to remember where you had pasted it last time. You may end up forgetting and your code becomes out of sync. So now 3 out of 4 places where you had copied and pasted the code have the updates, however one doesn't, and this keeps on continuing and your code becomes really inconsistent and really difficult to deal with, and this may end up requiring a complete rewrite. A module can also be shared and used by other Python projects if the need be. So for instance, if you have the need to share a module with other Python projects, this is also doable. This is what reusability is all about, being able to distribute files that you have written in order to either help other projects or help your own projects, but the projects that are different from the ones where you have implemented a particular piece of functionality. Now, let's take a look at scoped. So scoped is by far the most important aspect of using a module. Every bit of code in Python module is scoped to that file, meaning the changes or the variable names, the names that are taken by identifiers in that scope are essentially bounded in that file. Any other file in the entire project can have the same names. Just make sure that both the files are not in the same, are not containing the same structure. That's about it.
Just a quick info, guys. Test your knowledge of Python by answering this question. How many CPUs will the threading library use? A. 0, B. 1, C. 2, D. All available CPUs. Comment your answer in the comment section below. Subscribe to Intellipaat to know the right answer. Now, let's continue with the session.
So, which means that two modules containing the same function names and the same parameter list can coexist in the same project. So let's say I have a function that can connect to the database. The function name is called connect to database. Now this is existing in 3 modules. First one connects to a SQLite database, second one connects to a cloud database, third one connects to my own company specific database, let's say Oracle. Now I want to be able to use all of them, or at least write code that interacts with all these databases. So I can create connect to database function in 3 different files: SQL database, SQLite database, Oracle database, and cloud database. And these 3 files can contain the same function name without an issue. Now, if this was one giant file, let's say 10,000 lines of code, and I want to add a new uh, function called connect to database, which will be connecting to some external database, and I'm implementing it, and I run into an error saying that this keyword is already, this function name has already been taken, you need to take some other function name. That could be a real big issue, because you would have to come up with new names even though the current name works perfectly fine for your project. So this is something that you can overcome using modules. However, it is possible that these two functions are imported in the same file, which may result in naming conflict. So for instance, if I end up importing connect to database from the SQLite package, and I end up import SQLite module, and then I end up importing connect to database from the cloud database module as well, then this is going to be a problem, because now I have two things named exactly the same in the same file. So this could lead to a bit of a problem. So just something to watch out there.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides online Python certification training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
How we can use modules. Thus far, we have taken a look at what a module is and why would you want to use it. Now let's take a look at how we can use it. Now to make use of modules, we first need to create a module. Uh, Creating a module is not really that difficult, but firstly we need to have a module that we can use in other files. Let's take a look at how we can create one. Again, creating a module is quite easy. All you have to do is put all the code that you wish to be inside a module and put it inside a file. So to give you an example, let's say that you have a module that contains a lot of code, or you have a script file that contains a lot of code. Some of it could be extracted to a module. The only thing that you have to do in order to make it into a module is cut the entire thing out of the file that you are using currently, put it inside another file that is related, that contains all the related code to a specific problem, such as validation, database management, so on and so forth, then save it. That's a module that you have created. Now the module is created, but just make sure that you have saved it with a .py extension. .py lets it know that it's a Python file, and that's how we can create a Python module. Otherwise, when you are trying to import a particular file in another Python script, it won't be able to recognize it because the .py extension is something that is needed, or at least it expected. So you need to understand how to use it correctly. Just make sure that you're storing it with the .py extension and everything will work exactly how you suppose it to work. Now this file is a module and can be used by other Python files. So now all you have to do, the steps that we have taken thus far, is extract the code that you want inside a module, put it inside a file, save it with the .py extension. Make sure that you remember the name of the file as well, because that's the name of the module, but the .py extension is also very important. Now to make use of this module, we have to import items from this module which we wish to use. So simple way of doing it would be to import a module inside another module. You can import things separately from one module to another. You can import the entire module, or you can import everything from that module into another module. All of these things are something that you can do. Now for this, we have to make use of the import keyword in Python. Import is a very important keyword, mainly because it allows us to import things from other Python modules. And this Python keyword of import can be used in several ways. Now, when we say several ways, we mean that the import keyword can be used using several syntaxes, and each separate syntax allows it to understand how it can be used. So, for instance, as we have discussed, you can import all and everything from one module inside another Python script. You can import separate things from one module to another module instead of just randomly importing everything. You import a few things that you absolutely need in the file that you're using it. And finally, after that, the third thing is that once you have imported the module, you can also essentially rename the import things that you have imported so as to prevent naming conflicts. Now let's take a look at how we can use the import keyword and how we can import everything inside a Python module. Let's take a look at that now. Alright guys, now let's take a look at how you can create and import a module. So to do this, let me first show you the setup I have. I have an app.py file, and I have created it inside a folder. I'm going to open the command prompt here so that I can execute the Python file. Okay. Yeah, so it opened up. Now if I were to type Python app.py, since nothing's written inside the code, it's not going to show any output, but it is executed. So to execute some code, let me just write something here so that it shows that something is executed and we can be sure that it's working. I go back, run the same command. Now it should print hello. It does. That means it works. Now what we have to do is we have to create a module. Let's go through the entire process first. So let me say that I will be creating a function. That function is going to essentially format my string in a particular way. So let's say greet is going to be the name of the function. It's going to take in a parameter as name, and now it's going to return a string with percent %s, or I could just do it this way: 0, hello, 0, and that's it. Now I can call the format method and pass in the name. Now if I were to call print greet, John. If I save this and if I go back and run this again, as you can see that it is printing it exactly I want. Now when I want, now let's say that I have a lot of functions that sort of format the string in a way I want to. For instance, greet hello, greet good morning, greet goodbye, so on and so forth. So I can essentially create a new file. I'll call it greetings.py. I'll save it. This is done. Go back. Now I go import and I can import greetings. That's about it. Now to use it, I'll use greetings.greet. Now if I run this, it should work exactly the same way and the same output should be returned, which is what's happened. So this is how you can import an entire module. But let's say that importing an entire module is not something that you want. It has like hundreds of functions and you only want to access one. So all I have to do is, instead of using this, I can use from greetings, import, and since there's only one function, I'll use greet and I'll use greet. Now I can use it quite easily. Let's say that I create another function inside greetings.py, say goodbye underscore, and all it does is it prints goodbye, right? Now if I were doing it the old way, which is to say I was importing greeting, all I would have to do is use the same function here and I would say greeting dot say goodbye. That's about it. Now if I run this, the output should be hello John goodbye, and that's the way it's working. Now let's say that I want to import both the things that I am using, which is say goodbye and greet. So from greetings, import say goodbye and greet. Now that I've done that, I can just remove the prefixes. After I've done this, I will save it. Always make sure to save the code. If you're not save the code and you're running it again and again, then the thing that was saved last will be picked up from the file system and that will be run by the Python interpreter. I run it again, as you can see, it works completely fine. The problem now is, let's say that I have another function, so I'll just call it greet as greet saved, go back, run, and that works fine as well. So what I've done here is that I have changed the name from greet to greet. Let's say that there is another function calling from salutations. Let's say that the package that I created and I want to import greet from here as well. Now I can have greet here and this greet is turned to greet me. This is done. Now finally, let me just show you one way that I don't think you should use a lot. Having said that, if I run this again, here you'll get an error saying greet me is not defined. Now the issue is that I have renamed it and now it's working. I run this again and now you see this. The reason why I'm telling you that you shouldn't do this is because let's say that your code is 500, 600 lines of code and you've imported everything at the top. Now I go down and I have to create another function named greet. Let's say that it takes name and it just prints the name, or let's say it just returns the name with return. So this is just a bit different. If I were to run this now, as you can see, it's printing hello John. Now I'm going to be confused thinking, well, I created a function named greet. We go up, I'm using the function greet here. However, I'm not getting the same output because here I'm getting, okay, so I am using this and then I go here and this is what it does. So hello, and I'll press to this so that it's a little easier for you to see. See, it's using the greet function that I have imported, but not the greet function that I have created. Now that's a problem. I know I have created a greet function. I know it should be working, but it's not working correctly. Let me do this again. And now as you can see that it's working correctly because I've imported at the top. But now let's say that I want to use this code here, right? Let's say this is somewhere down here. I have imported the greet function from greetings using import star. I go down and I use the greet function. However, I am getting the output that is different from the one that I wanted to use. Similarly, let's say I have imported 4 modules, all of them have the greet function, and this could be a problem as well. So to avoid many of these problems, just import functions like this. Say goodbye and greet. And if you want to alias them, then you can alias them as such, as and use this. If you want to alias this one, then as, say goodbye, say GB, and so on and so forth. So that's the way you can create and import modules. All right, now let's take a look at what else we can learn.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides online Python certification training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
How we can execute modules as scripts. So an important thing to note is when you are importing a module is that when you do so, Python interpreter executes any bit of code that is inside a module. So for instance, if you import, let's say you say import sound, and inside the sound module there's nothing but just a few print statements, then they will get executed and they will be appearing on your screen or on your terminal or wherever the print statement prints the thing. So in cases like this may be something that you want or maybe something you do not want. So if you're trying to import a few files and you end up getting some unnecessary output on your screen, then this may be the reason why that is. Now, when you write import sound, all the code inside the import sound inside the sound.py module is executed by the Python interpreter first, and then they import the thing that you want to import inside the current module. This is done so that every bit of functionality that is needed for the entire file is set up already. For instance, if you want to execute a function and that function has some setup code, then that gets executed first. If you are, for instance, importing a function that can insert things to the database, but firstly you need to connect things to the database, then you can run that code immediately as soon as the function gets the file gets executed. But there may be cases where you don't want to do it that way and you want it to be done only when the script is being specifically executed by the Python interpreter and not when it is being imported. So if you wish to make this file usable as a script which can be executed and a module in which from which the functionality can be imported, then we can use the global underscore name underscore property. It's also called a dunder name because it has two underscores on both sides. Now the underscore name underscore property is set to underscore main underscore. And this value is a string value. So when a script is executed with Python interpreter, that is Python sound.py. So if I have a script and I execute it with the Python command and the script name, and I press enter, then this value, the global value inside that module will be set to underscore main. Using this, you can take a look at the code that is being executed. So if there is some code which should be executed when this file is executed, then you put it inside the if statement, and all you do is you check whether the underscore name property is set to underscore main. The reason why is so that only if the Python file is being specifically executed, then you execute this code. Otherwise, you just run through the entire file, execute any bit of code that is necessary for the setup, and let people import things from this. This is a common practice that you see in Python, and in Python files you can see many files as being executable scripts as well as being importable modules. When you take a look at the code in GitHub, you'll find that many of the GitHub projects have the same kind of code and they have this bit of code dangling at the end. So now you can understand why this bit of code is there and why is it used in that way. Executing modules as scripts. So let me just show you what I mean by that. So I have app.py and I have greetings.py. It has two functions, but let's say that I have written some statement. Module being executed. Okay. And this goes to the top. Start. Save this, go back, import greetings. Now if I go back and if I run the code, as you can see, this code is also executed. Now this may not be something that I want. I want this to be executed only when I run this code. Okay, so when I run this code, this should be executed. That's perfectly fine. But when I run app.py and this is being imported by some other module, then this code should not be run. So how do I go about doing that? Well, mainly what I can do here is this. I can put both of them inside a statement. Let me just show you one thing before I do this. I will comment this one out. Right. Now, let me just show you the value of underscore name. Save this, go back. I run python app.py, the underscore name value is greetings, which is the name of the module, which is perfectly fine. Now, if I were to run this, as you can see, its name is set to underscore main. That means this is the file from where the execution has started. This is the file that was considered to be the main file. So now what I can do is I go here and all I have to do is check that if underscore name is equal to underscore main, then perform these tasks, else don't perform these tasks. So now it should work perfectly fine. If I run it this way, it works. If I run this way, the code is not executed. Another thing to notice is that in many times when you're executing code in another languages such as C++, C, Java, they have a main function. The main function is the function which gets executed once it's the first function that gets executed. It's also called the driver function. So in cases like this, many people, for the familiarity or some other reason, they create a main function in which they put all the code that they wish to be executed. And now all I have to do is this. Now if I run the code, it should work like this. Yeah, so it works. So if you want, you can do it this way. If you want, you can do it the other way, in which you have the body of the statement to be function, to be the execution, the codes that need to be executed once the function is executed. I like keeping things in a function, but that's completely your choice. So this is how you can do it. Now after importing it, I can just use it the way I want it to, and this is how you can import modules as scripts.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides online Python certification training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below.
Okay guys, we've come to the end of this session. I hope this session was helpful and informative for you. If you have any queries, leave a comment down below.
Thanks for watching.